Amazing. Well, thank you very much for agreeing to be on the podcast. You are officially the first director we've ever had. We've had authors, we've had speakers, but we've never had an author before. And I've just said we've had an author. We've never had a director before. And I actually rewatched $10 Death Trip last night to be super kind of fresh on it for having this chat. Before we get into talking about the film, I kind of want to ask a couple of questions about you, if that's all right. And first of all, what was it that got you into documentary making?
Good question. I always get asked that. I don't ever really completely know the answer. I sort of fell into it. It was never really the plan. So I worked in PR for quite a long time, and not a long time, but for a few years. And through the course of that, started kind of increasingly working with video. So trained in media, but kind of started cut my teeth in written press and doing some TV kind of work, but like behind the scenes. And I think I've always been really interested in people, and I've always been really interested in the world, and I'm just kind of quite naturally curious. And I just found that was my passion, and it took me quite a long time to find it. But I would say anybody that hasn't found their passion yet, keep looking, because it is a really beautiful thing to find that thing in life that you just love doing, and you just wake up and it's quite a tired cliche to say that you won't work a day in your life if you find what you love. And I don't know if that's true, because there's definitely days where it feels like, you're pushing shit uphill. But by and large, I think if you can find something that you just love doing, then that is the way that you should spend the rest of your life when you find that thing.
Yeah.
And for me, I sort of stumbled across it. And I think, honestly, I would do it even if I didn't need to. Do you know what I mean? Like, if I won the lottery and I didn't have any kind of financial imperative to work, I think I'd still make films.
Yeah.
I think it's just the thing that I'm kind of destined to do, and I love doing, and it somehow completes me. And so, I guess fluked upon that discovery over a few years, through just interviewing people in more of a kind of PR and media context.
Yeah.
And also, I think there's something about making documentaries that combines a few things that I love. So it's that element of storytelling and the privilege that it is to be able to tell people's life stories, mixed with the kind of craft of filmmaking, which is still sort of something which I think you learn every day.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty early in my journey still. I think there's still so much more to learn. But that idea of kind of honing the craft of all of the different elements that make a film, which I find really interesting and fulfilling. Like a few years ago, I kind of figured that out and started Hide and Seek, which is my production company, and here we are a few years later.
What was the first topic that you covered?
It's different again because I kind of morphed into making films. So I made quite a lot of short. I made a series of short films. Would be quite early in the journey, about refugees in Australia. So there was a series of sort of short, very short biopics, really, of people that had come from Indonesia to Australia on leaky boats and had been detained in offshore detention and split from their kids and families. And it was a kind of a deep dive throughout a series into some of the mental health implications for those people, many of whom have been kind of fleeing war. That was pretty early on. The first feature-length piece I probably did was another biopic about a judo star called Neil Adams, called A Game of Throws, ingeniously titled. that was an interesting story about a great guy, Neil, who won 2 silver medals in the Olympics. And you think that would be pretty good, but actually they were a source of complete sort of shame for him because he was tipped to win gold. And I was really interested in the story of how he kept them locked in a Tesco's carrier bag in the loft. And they were like his dirty secret that he just didn't want to confront or deal with. And then he retired and had to deal with the realization that he wouldn't get another shot at gold. And that was probably the first feature that I directed and produced.
So how do you choose the topics that you're going to cover?
Yeah, so I like to pretend there's some really scientific logic behind this. And in reality, what it actually is it will be a fleeting kind of thought, or reading a newspaper article, or it could be a conversation that you overhear on a train. It could be anything, but something comes onto my radar or one of the team that works with me, and then we'll go, shit, there's a documentary in that, and there's probably like at any one time 30 things like that are like the germ of an idea. And they kind of, I don't know how it works, to be honest, which ones go from that stage into actually becoming a documentary. I think we just kind of we sit with them for a little while and we just carry on knocking some ideas around. And it's typically like which ones generate the most excitement and which ones do we feel that we want to do the most. And the thing that's really nice is all of the films that we've done so far have been independent productions.
Yeah.
So we can kind of do what we want. And probably that will change in the future. But if it does, it's a double-edged sword, because at the moment there is that complete creative freedom.
Yeah.
Of just saying, you know what, that's a cool story and we'd love to do it. And that's enough at the moment, because we're small and because we're independent, that's enough for us to just go, sod it, let's do it. And so that tends to be, in truth, that tends to be how we choose our subjects.
Do you remember how it came about to this? Well, obviously with Fentanyl, a death trip, because obviously you're British yourself. It's something that's at the moment. I know obviously in the documentary you talk about the fact that the rest of the world might begin to start kind of being impacted by this, but you obviously mentioned one thing about being was it immigrants, or refugees in Australia, and then now you've got the fentanyl crisis in Northern America, but primarily focused on Vancouver. Why? What was it that led you to choose that?
Well, I was making another film in Australia about drug policy, and the research for that film took me to Vancouver, where there was a drugs conference, and a lot of people that we wanted to talk to and interview for our documentary in Australia were going to be there. So I went to Vancouver for that, and just the course of being in Vancouver, I just couldn't really believe what the situation was there with regards to the fentanyl crisis, and just to sort of see it firsthand like that was straight away something that we came back and said we've got to go there and make a film about what's happening there, and to try and open people's eyes to the dangers of a toxic drug supply and what could happen when this reaches other parts of the world, and to try and, with a view to trying to prepare policymakers and people generally for that, and to be ready for it, because there's ways you can save lives if you are.
Yeah, 100%. One particular line that kind of stuck out to me when it was a line of your own actually yesterday, which was when you were talking about the tents, the safe injection sites, and it said, these are technically illegal, but sometimes there's sometimes like the law has to come second when you're in a crisis. Yeah. And it's like kind of the way that it's all happened over there. I mean, what I suppose led me to end up actually watching the documentary was I was over in Canada myself in like September, October time, And I went to Vancouver 13 years ago, maybe even earlier than that, actually, because my eldest was 17 now, and he was a newborn back then, so like 17-ish years ago. Spent time in Gastown, spent time in at the aquarium, doing all the parks, all of that stuff. And I completely and utterly did not see any of that area, because I think we were getting taxis everywhere and all the rest of that. Now, the stage I'm in with my life now, me and my wife, we tend to walk everywhere. Yeah. And we're the type of people that okay, we've got stuff to do in uptown Manhattan and downtown Manhattan on the same day, so let's walk down to the Brooklyn Bridge and then let's walk right the way up, and all the rest of it. And we've had people call us nutters and stuff, because we'll be like, here's a photo of us under the Brooklyn Bridge at 7:00 at night and it's pitch black, and people are like, what are you doing? But we're that type of people that will literally just will walk everywhere. I like to see a city that way. Obviously, when my son was newborn, I wasn't walking everywhere. It's there was a pram, there was all the rest of that stuff. And so I was right, we were staying at Canada Place. We were getting on a cruise 2 days later. We were staying at Canada Place. Gastown was a 5-minute walk down the road. And then we wanted to go to this beer place that was in a gentrified region, the opposite side of town. And we walked down East Hastings, and my accent might not be super clear, but I'm from Anfield in Liverpool, right? So I kind of grew up in a very rough area. So most areas don't bother me, most areas don't. But one thing with we walked through this area, and I kind of said to my wife again is oblivious. She'll just walk. She's from Eastern Europe, so she's seen worse as well. So she's so we'll walk through anywhere. And I was this is bad. Where's this all come from? And I couldn't get my head around it. And I was and I actually felt unsafe. But she was like, oh, come on, let's just keep going. The place we're trying to get to is 4-6 blocks that way. If we go round, and we've already come 2 blocks in, we'd have to go 2 blocks out. How long can this go on for, etc. But then after a couple of blocks, I started noticing, after that initial fear response had kind of subsided, and I kind of started noticing the community aspects of it, and people selling things on the street, and other people just coming in and out of buildings, with CrossFit gyms and all the rest of it. And it was just normal. And nobody of any of the people on the streets there, not a single person bothered us or said anything to us or did anything to us. And I was just and it kind of my whole opinion, even within that sort of 6 blocks, had gone from that initial sort of base fear response, straight up to, this is just a community. It's and I think the documentary does an absolutely fantastic job of showing the human aspect of it. Some of the people you speak to, I'm absolutely. Is it Spike? Just love him. And this is it. There's real people and the real people there, and it's real lives. And I work in mental health in the UK, and basically whatever someone's doing, it's usually it's a symptom, not the cause. Drugs are often. Well, again, this the conclusion I made on this last night whilst watching it was that with the fentanyl situation, it's the cause and the solution, and the cause and the solution, and the cause and the solution, and it's this cyclical process of especially to people who try it for the first time, it's it becomes the cause of the problem and then becomes the solution to the problem, and it's the only solution to the problem that they see. Is that what so I've just rambled on a load with no real question there, but kind of what was your first impressions of kind of going in and seeing this for the first time? You said obviously we need to go and make a film about this. Well, what was your impression of the area and of the people going in before you made the film?
Well, it's I suppose visually it's quite shocking, because it's different to what it's most people from most communities, right, are not used to seeing people openly using drugs everywhere in the street. So that is a sort of surprising thing to see. And as you say, you kind of, if you're in Gastown in Vancouver, which is pretty gentrified, and it's all kind of craft beer and frappuccinos and stuff, and it's only really a block or 2 away.
Yeah.
And lots of tourists go there and have no idea that just the other side of just a few minutes walk away is downtown East Side, and what that looks like. And I suppose people hear the term drugs ghetto or whatever, and They think that it might be very scary or a place that, and look, yeah, there's probably quite a high level of inquisitive crime there, because there's poverty, there's desperation, people are doing it really tough. But as you say, it didn't feel to me at all like an intimidating place to be. And bizarrely, well, I suppose, I don't know why I would even say bizarrely, because it's not necessarily bizarre, but I think a lot of people might be surprised to think that the overwhelming feeling from spending time in that community is actually love and unity and community and people looking out for each other.
Yeah.
And I think you feel it more strongly in that community than you do in the community that I live in, and quite a lot of other communities. Yeah. There's this really strong sense that those are the values that hold people together. And because homelessness is really, really high, there is a sense that people have to look out for themselves, but also people are looking out for each other.
Yeah.
And I was really struck by the kindness, the humanity, the fact that actually people that are like living under a bridge in the freezing cold and wet, and winters are tough in Vancouver, for people living homeless. I was struck by the humor and also the richness of the characters. Like there's just these amazing, like I feel like you couldn't really make a bad documentary there, because everyone there is so interesting, so cool, so funny, has, that everybody's got a backstory that will blow your mind. And that was what I found, really. Yeah. I didn't find it, we've shot in quite a lot of films in different places where there's different levels of danger, conflict zones and things like that. And I didn't at any point feel that we were in danger at all. Yeah. People were really accepting of us, really welcoming, and really sort of, and also really kind of interested in the fact that we were doing a film, and keen to hang out. And it was that was how it was.
Yeah, I found it was like when Spike says to you, let's go take a walk on the wild side, and it's like, and you're like, is it the wild side? He's like, no, actually, it's like, I'm just being sarcastic. It's like, it's one of the actual safest places and most loving places. And like, even when scenes like when someone's already there, having used some fentanyl, and they're kind of slumped over or they're lying on the floor, and then checking in on it, and when he goes, I'm sorry for kind of, he's like just checking in, and he's like, sorry for stepping into your personal space and everything. He's like so considerate. And his story, I think, broke my heart the most, I think, because he talks about being an addict earlier in life, and then when his son's mother took her own life, he got himself clean to raise his son. And when he talks about his son, that he did a really good job raising his son, and it's just this like, for me, it's like it's like, I always try and tell people, like, no, let's not look black and white at people. Let's not look like, good and bad, like I said, as in that way. It's like there's so many different ways of a person. Like he was good at that point, and especially at the end when he says like he's proud of who he still is. It's like if he'd have changed any of that, it would have changed who he was. And it's like it's seeing within that person, like, I was just not traumatized, but like really upset by the fact that he then got in that accident. That I imagine, like, it doesn't say it in the documentary, but I imagine when he got in the accident, they'll have put him on a lot of painkillers, because he got, he was injured in about 20 different places on his body. They'd have put him on painkillers again to get him through that. And like, and again, he looks like he's still injured to this day. He looks like those injuries haven't fully healed. So, it's like, did that lead him back into that? And like, how did he got out of it at one point for his son? Is there a way he can get out of it for himself? Like, that's, that's the kind of questions I'm asking whilst kind of sat watching it. But yeah, him in particular, I feel really showed the humanity. With seeing that, did you then? Because I imagine you've always got an idea of what you want the audience to take away from, like from everything that you put out there. What was it that you wanted, like a viewer, to take away from this piece?
Before we filmed it.
Yeah, go on. If it is it a before and then it changed? Because if there isn't, I'm going to get comfy and just let you tell this whole story.
I think honestly, we don't have a really clear idea before we film stuff of exactly how the film's going to pan out, because we've kind of learned better than that from experience.
Yeah.
Because and that's the thing I really love about documentary as a genre, instead rather than other forms of narrative film or drama or comedy or whatever that's scripted, is that it's real life, and you can't direct it. It's sort of, it will play out how it plays out. And so I think you have to just go in with a really open mind. Of course, you've got a kind of idea of what the message behind the film might be and what the point of it might be, and even maybe some of the structure of the film. But honestly, in Downtown Eastside, almost nothing went to plan. It's we had like a bunch of interviews lined up, and lots of those didn't happen. As you can imagine, life's quite chaotic there, and especially if people are homeless or they're kind of dealing with addiction and things like that. Sometimes it's not easy to come to appointments at certain times and things like that. So things move, and that's kind of the way it is. And so you have to just really be prepared to be very malleable and roll with it. Yeah. And so, and I think if you're not, you're going to have a problem trying to make a documentary.
Well, yeah. It's like, can you talk on this specific thing for me? Because I've got an angle I kind of want. So what about once you'd got all the filming done and it come time to like edit it and then choose like an order, like a focal point, like, because I actually think this may have been deliberate or not, but I feel like the documentary follows quite a clear narrative. It starts with a good introduction to an individual, then an introduction to the area, then here's what people are doing within that area to kind of to combat this, or to not even combat this, but to actually help the people that like are living with this. Then here's what's going on outside of that wider area, and then again back to kind of showing. I feel like it does have quite a clear narrative flow. Was that something that you then, once you got all the footage, you kind of thought, actually, now that I've seen all this is the story that I want to tell? Or
I worked with the editor Chris Hales, who worked very closely with me on this throughout the process. I think one of the first challenges was knowing who were the key characters, because so many of them were so compelling. There's like sort of 20 characters that all were sort of amazing on camera, and you really felt an empathy for them as a viewer. So to decide how to structure it from a kind of character point of view was one challenge. But we always kind of had that idea, like you said, of setting the scene, kind of laying out a kind of problem statement of showing people what the situation was in Downtown Eastside and beyond. And we always had an idea of some of the key questions that we wanted to ask. Mm-hmm. Not that we'd necessarily answer them all, but there was questions that we wanted the documentary to ask, like what would happen if fentanyl came to the UK in this kind of quantity, or Australia or other countries outside of North America. And then to start to look at, in the end, kind of in the final act, I suppose, what are some of the things that are being done to combat the opioid crisis? And that's where we looked at the clinic that's giving out heroin to its customers, and some of the other ideas that people are having to try and combat a problem which is so extreme now in America. This is something that's killing more than car accidents, road deaths, homicide, guns combined, about 100,000 deaths a year. So and I guess that was our kind of very, very basic structure.
Yeah.
And we also kind of came up with this idea of the characters bouncing off each other in certain scenes. So having these quite montagey little kind of bits where there was multiple characters that were quite theme based, and then letting other scenes just play out with single characters that we felt were some of the really good characters. So Ronnie being one of those, who's the guy that the film opens with, but then there's a big scene of him at the end. He's the young guy in the baseball jersey, and the couple in the street. Yeah. And then to use Spike, because Spike was so lively and energetic, and he was always like kind of ducking and diving around the alleyways and on the move, to use him almost as a bit of a vehicle to take us in between scenes. So he's a kind of bit of a tour guide, and he's like diving around, taking you into the next scene, always kind of on the move. So to use his kind of like physical energy as almost as that kind of transition between scenes.
So let's what one particular person that kind of I think sticks out a lot in this is it Sylvester the dealer. So for the benefit of people listening, Sylvester's very sort of candid about the fact that like if people don't buy it from me, they're buying it from somewhere else. If I don't do this, it's not going to change the problem whatsoever. This is just a job. I've got to pay bills. I could be out robbing people. Like that was kind of like his attitude towards it. How did you feel hearing that?
Well, I felt very surprised in the first instance when he approached us and asked to be on the film, for obvious reasons, because here in the UK, that I don't think you get a drug dealer saying that they want to appear on camera.
Yeah, full face, no obscuring of it, no change in the voice, none of that. It's straight to camera. Well, you're straight to you. It's over.
Yeah, and we wanted to. We thought it was really important to have a voice from the kind of supply chain, and we tried, and we had like different conversations going on, but it was a back and forth negotiation. It was based obviously around anonymizing people, blurring their face, changing their name. And Sylvester was kind of like, first of all, he really wanted to be in it. He came up to us so initially in the first instance, he came up to us because he'd seen us around town filming. And he came up to us and said, "Oh, what are you guys filming?" We said, "Oh, we're making a documentary about fentanyl." And he said, "Oh, you should interview me. I sell it." And I said, "Okay. I mean, we could talk about that." And we sort of got to know him over the next couple of days and talked about how we would do it. And we said, "Look, we'll blur your face and we'll change your name." And he was like, "No, fuck that." He's like, "My name's Sylvester." So Sylvester's his real name. And I don't even know like I should say that because it makes it easier maybe for the authorities to find him. But he was very insistent that his name was Sylvester, and he wanted to own it, and he wanted to be very open about it. Mm-hmm. And so that was the first thing that was very surprising to me. It also, I think, speaks to a different climate out there, which is that actually he probably won't get. He said to me, do you think I'll get arrested? And I said, honestly, yeah, I think you might. Mm. Like, do you know what I mean? I wouldn't do it if I was you, because I think there's a risk. And he said, "Nah, I won't. I don't think so. I won't get arrested, and I don't care." Yeah. And I sort of looked into it since, and I think he might be right that actually it's a very different climate out there. So there is a culture, not a culture, but there is very open drug use. Yeah. Everywhere in the streets, and there are police around, and there's no inhibitions. People don't go, "Shit, there's the old Bill, hide the drugs," or whatever.
Yeah.
the police just walk by and they see people injecting in the street.
Yeah.
So it's and it's past the point of police trying to come by and arrest everybody.
Yeah.
It wouldn't work. There'll just be like more people back the same day, and so that's actually not the way to solve the problem. And the police have become pragmatic to that, I think. And I think by and large, they also probably don't go after the small-time dealers. They might hassle them a bit and they might give them a bit of grief on the streets. But really, that's not who they're interested in. You know, they're interested in the big guys that are actually flooding the fentanyl supply into Vancouver.
Yeah.
That's where the game's at in order to try and, address the toxic supply of drugs. But as Spike says, the problem is that you can't put the genie back in the bottle. And it's kind of a bit late now. There is a massive problem with illegal fentanyl, and that ship's kind of sailed.
Yeah.
There's a huge level of demand for it, and there's a massive illegal market. And a lot of people out there have come to the conclusion that the only thing that you can do now to really counter that illegal market is to either create a legal market or to create a safe supply of drugs that, whilst they might not be good for you, at least won't kill you.
Yeah, exactly. And like, I think that's what, again, something that you show quite well with the documentary of like the safe injection sites, or like or the actual clinic where people can get heroin instead of fentanyl. It's like when you actually talk to Sylvester and he's basically, it's like he shows you the $10 tab of fentanyl, and you were like, if I take that, will it kill me? And he's like, well, if you've never taken it before, then probably pretty much certainly it will do. Yeah. And you're like, will the same amount of heroin kill me? And he's like, no, not at all. It's like, it's just how deadly it is. And obviously there's reports and stuff now of people essentially buying fentanyl over the internet and stuff in America. And essentially like taking a quarter of a tab and then dying instantly. And it's like, and I mean, I know this probably not the world. I had a Dr. Phil quote on it, and I know Dr. Phil's probably not the world's greatest person to talk about this, but hey, he's like, but he was like, the people aren't overdosing; they're being poisoned. It's like they're taking a dose that actually shouldn't kill a person, and actually what they're getting is significantly more potent than anything that they've ever seen before. It's like, and with regards to, so obviously you focus a lot on things like the clinics and the injection sites. One thing, I mean, again, I didn't pick up on it, but I feel like the individual recovery wasn't really something that came up. And I thought like the two people I suppose that represent that is it Guy? He's like 7 years in recovery. And when it came up and says Guy, 7 years in recovery, I thought, okay, he's probably going to talk about how he got out. And then you've also got the couple, Stephen and Julia. Like I watched it last night. It might these might be tremendously accurate. They might be a million miles off. But I thought like they said, she witnessed him have that overdose, and that's it. Now they're done. They're out, and it's a good job you mentioned Ronnie before, because he said I'd forgotten his name entirely. He's like, I made one choice, at one point, which was the first time he injected, and from that point, it's no longer a choice anymore. There are people that get out, and there are people that get clean from it. Is that something that you, with some of the stuff that wasn't on, like that wasn't used in the final documentary, was that conversations that you actually had with people?
Yeah. So there's really sad news about Stephen and Julia. Unfortunately, since we filmed, both of those have really sadly been lost to overdose. And I didn't want to really sort of bring the mood down earlier, but Spike as well. So
don't worry, I'm a mental health professional. I have tissues under my desk for this very reason. You can bring the mood wherever it needs to be.
It's and look, it's that's very hard, actually. Surprisingly hard for us as a sort of production team, more than you think it might be. And I don't want to sort of overstate the level of grief that we might feel, because it would be way worse for their friends and family and people that know them. But there is a strange kind of intimacy that you get when you're making a documentary about somebody.
Yeah.
And even if you've only met them fleetingly, which is the case with some people, we didn't spend much time with Stephen and Julia. We did spend quite a bit of time with Spike. We got to know him over a couple of weeks. But even when you've only just met them, and Spike was just as great a guy off camera, even more so than you think. He was just brilliant and so funny, and just like an incredible person. Actually ran for city council towards the end of his life, and even Stephen and Julia, we didn't know them well. We probably kind of filmed with them for about an hour, and you cut that into like a 5-minute scene, but you watch that hour hundreds of times probably, to make that scene. And so even ordinarily, somebody that you met for an hour would be gone for your life and you'd barely remember them. But you actually find yourself kind of feeling like you know somebody on quite a deep level, because you start to really understand their body language and the way they talk and their little kind of nuances. And the more and more you watch them, the more you start to be able to link that with how they're feeling. And so it's very shocking and very somber when to receive that news. And I can't even imagine what it's like for the people in that community, that have known them for years. But it illustrates the scale of the problem, right? It sort of, it illustrates the point that the film is trying to make. That this is a toxic drug supply, and the situation is fucked for so many people out there. Now I realize that wasn't your question. Your question was about recovery. And I think that is really important to say. And the truth is that, it's a 52-minute documentary. You can't cover everything. So it's not going to be completely comprehensive. But I think it is a really important message to say that people can recover. Treatment works. Doesn't always work instantly, and it doesn't always work straight away for everybody, but it does work. And to anybody that might be watching or listening to this that's going through an addiction problem themselves, or any kind of, I know you deal with mental health and stuff as well. And I think part of that is when you're in the middle of it, you probably can't see a way out of it. You probably don't think I'll never be, you probably think I'll always be addicted, whether it's smoking or whether it's, opiates or whatever it is. You think I'm never going to be able to live without this, but you can. And loads of people that also thought that now currently are. And a guy who you mentioned is an inspirational example of that. And somebody that's done TED Talks and used to live on those streets. And, he was homeless for years, and he was a daily heroin user, and a very, very heavy heroin user. I can't remember. I haven't actually watched the film for quite a long time myself, but he mentioned the amount he was spending every day on heroin.
I think it was like $600 a day.
$600 a day. And now he's like helping other people. So recovery works. Treatment works. It's not easy, and it takes time. But in order for people to get treatment, they first of all have to be alive. You can't get somebody through a drug addiction if they're dead. And so the first priority, I think, has to be about keeping people alive, which is harm reduction. And that means, if that fentanyl is going to kill you, what's a safer way of getting you through today that it won't kill you? That might be that there's supervision. It might be that you replace that drug with something else. It's not realistic to say just don't take drugs. Like, we can live in that fantasy land, which is the policy of many governments around the world of just saying, well, you shouldn't be taking drugs, so just don't take them.
Yep.
That is so willfully ignorant of the actual reality of what addiction is.
Yep.
And it's been proven to not work anywhere in the world. So I find that the equivalent of just kind of like putting your fingers in your ears and going la 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 la, you know.
Have you tried not being a drug addict? You know, it's like
what about not being a drug addict? Yeah,
I face a similar thing in the work that I do. Is because in my day job I work for the Lancashire and South Cumbria NHS Trust, and one of the all the parents are super happy when I'm doing talks in schools about like depression and anxiety, helping out people with that. But we've recently added self-harm into the syllabus, and self-harm is something that people get addicted to, and it's also one of the first steps to help someone with self-harm addiction is to help them understand how to self-harm safely. And that is such a controversial topic with like the parents. They're like, because like Lancashire Mind literally will give out safe self-harm kits. And it's because it's very similar. Like it's so many parallels to kind of like the safe needle dispensaries and stuff where you were interviewing, where the person's going to go out there and use toilet water, or they're going to go out there and reuse a needle that's been used before. You know, people who are self-harming, if they don't know how to do it safely. It's like what they're going to use, or more importantly, where they're going to do it on their body. They could hit an artery, they could bleed out before they're even. They don't know what they're doing, and also and the risk of infection is extremely high, because like instead of knowing how to clean a wound, the kids that are doing it, they'll just do it, hide it, like put something over it so it's not bleeding, but then and hide it from and then no one else will see it. Like when you say I can't remember the person's name now, but the person says that the reason when you talk about the Narcan, it's like it can stop an overdose like that, and it's like, why? Well, if it can stop an overdose like that, why are people still dying from overdoses? And it's because they do it on their own, because there's shame, because they hide it, and again, it like bringing it into the light, bringing it into spaces where you are supervised, where someone else is around, as you said with the tents and with the clinic, there is literally 0 overdoses within there, like not like a few, like 0. And that's as you rightly said, like if someone's still alive, there's still a chance for change. Like no matter how far someone is into an addiction, like the only thing that stops there from being a chance for that person to recover is death.
It's exactly right. I mean, first of all, as you say, preventing an overdose, I've come to learn through making this film and others, is as simple as somebody being there with Narcan or oxygen, and you will reverse an overdose every time. It's actually virtually impossible to die from overdose in a situation where there is medical supervision available. So there's about 120 centres in the world which are legally kind of medically supervised injection sites. About 30, I think, of those are in Canada. And this week, it's been announced that there's going to be one in Dublin. I think Dublin, Ireland, anyway, definitely, which is quite groundbreaking for this part of the world. And no one has ever died in any of them. I know we filmed in the one in Sydney as well. They've supervised about 1.5 million injections. And no one's ever died. And yet there's 100,000 people dying from intravenous drug use outside of those in just North America every year. And so you've got to start looking at that and saying, those are lives that can be saved. And there are ways to save those lives. Now, you might not approve of people doing drugs. I don't really care if you do or if you don't. But I don't think that's a relevant question in the first instance. I think we've actually got to get real about drug use in the first instance, and rather than sort of quite obtusely saying, well, if people just said no, they wouldn't have this problem. We actually need to say there's 100,000 people here that are dying, which is not a situation that we would accept for any other health condition, and those are lives that have value, and we should try and save them.
Yeah.
And there are ways that we can save them. And I think when you look at, I think you said earlier that, is it Dr. Phil or someone has said that these people are being poisoned.
Yeah.
If you can equate it to prohibition of alcohol in the in the 20s, right, where it was disastrous on so many levels. It's sort of spawned the rise of Al Capone and the mafia, created an illegal underworld, which is what we see now with illicit drugs. You know, you've got countries that are basically overrun by cartels of virtually lawless states because only because drugs are illegal.
Yeah. And
it's created an opportunity in places like Mexico for gangsters to basically take multi-billion-dollar industry into the black market. So that's the first thing. That's causes a massive uprising in violent crime, and creates lawless states, and that's money that could be taxed. But the second thing is, during prohibition of alcohol, what you got was people making dodgy bootleg moonshine in bathtubs, and people dying as a result because they didn't know what they were doing. And what you see is a similar situation now with the fentanyl crisis in North America. We're leaving the production of really harmful substances in the hands of bandits and gangsters. And I don't know if you like a drink, Dave.
I've been known to. I'm a full-on craft beer snob, to be honest.
What's your typical
craft beer and rum? I really like a good rum.
Okay, you buy a bottle of rum, or you know, if you have a pint of beer, you know what's in that. It's on the side of the can, and it tells you the strength, and it's got some safety information, and crucially, it will always be the same.
Yep.
So you know that if you drink 6 of them, you'll be pissed.
Yep.
There are factors that could affect that, right? There are other variables like have you eaten, are you tired? But by and large, you've got a pretty good indicator of what your tolerance is.
Yeah.
People buying fentanyl, it's Russian roulette, you know. They can think, right, 1 tab got me like absolutely, I was like flying last time. And then they'll take one that will be like really weak and not have any strength. Yeah. So then they'll think, oh, maybe I'll get 2 or whatever, and they'll die instantly because it'll be like 100 times stronger than the one they bought yesterday.
Yeah.
So that's incredibly dangerous. Now, I'm not like people might be listening thinking, oh, this guy's some mad hippie that thinks we should all be like off our tits on.
I'm pro decriminalisation. And most of my community are as well, by the way. So you don't have to, I'm not pro legalisation, but I'm pro decriminalisation.
I think, and it's not about being pro drugs. Like I think it can actually be from the stance of thinking that taking drugs is a really bad idea a lot of the time, and not recommended. But that doesn't mean we want people to be dying.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't mean that we want like kids to be going to music festivals and not coming home.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's a situation which is totally preventable and unacceptable. No one should be dying from MDMA. It's comparatively not a dangerous drug compared to others, as long as it's regulated and tested.
Yeah. Yeah, one thing you've said then when you said, was it being Russian roulette, that reminded me of something that I think it's one of the girls in the safe injection site, and she says it's a surprise every time. You don't know what you're gonna get, and she said it in a quite an upbeat kind of fun way, and I was like, it's like. One of the most interesting things I've ever seen on gambling addiction is a guy using an MRI machine whilst playing on a slot machine, and it shows what the dopamine receptors in his brain light up to. And the thing is, they light up to playing. They only light up to winning slightly above playing. So like winning, like the playing itself is automatically the reward. However, the biggest light up that they get, they go completely wild when it's a near miss, when it's close to a win but not a win. And in fact, actually, the reward hormones in your brain, like at that point, really go off. So that's what we're not necessarily addicted to the thing. We're addicted to how the thing makes us feel. It's and this is the thing, I kind of saw that a little bit in that the gamble, that actual gamble, you to someone who's never used, or to, I mean, I've used drugs in my life, so I know kind of some of that. But to people who've never used, they kind of think, well, that gamble sounds terrifying. Whereas I think to some people in that, it actually sounds quite exciting. You're like, it's like when Sylvester's like, everyone's after that dark green, give me some of that dark green. It's like, why are they after that? Well, they found out that it's killing people, therefore they know it's good stuff. It's like, and what he said, I think, was something like, each one of them's convinced that they'll be the one that can handle it, they'll be the one that can tolerate it. And I feel like that gamble in itself is like, it's linked to that same sort of thing with gambling. It's like in the fact that the taking the chance is part of the experience. It's not something that pushes people away. If anything, it's actually something that draws them in further.
Yeah, you could be right. Although I think it's not necessarily the case that people in downtown Eastside are sort of thrill seekers. Like I think there is an element of, recreational drug taking that is about that. I think it's probably more about
escapism,
just something that's become a necessary medication. Do you know what I mean? And when you and I've interviewed so many people that are experiencing drug addiction, and asked them, what is the feeling of heroin? What's the feeling of fentanyl? And I get the same answer over and over again. And a phrase that often comes up is, it's like a warm hug.
Yeah.
And I think that what you got to think is that you need a warm hug. I know it's a metaphorical thing we're talking about, but if you're sleeping in sort of like -5 degrees in the pissing rain under a bridge, and you don't know where the next meal's coming from or the next shower, that is a form of painkiller, really. Yeah. That is a form of comfort that just blocks it all out. Yeah. And you've also, I think it's also important to remember that all opiates, including fentanyl and heroin, are painkillers. That's like all they are. So heroin's like kind of stronger morphine, and fentanyl's even stronger morphine, basically. And you mentioned Spike with his physical injury. What was a surprise to me was how many people have got into using opiates because of physical pain as well. And especially in America, where they've had a big problem with over-prescribing opiates through a kind of crazy sort of medical system that incentivized doctors to do it.
Yeah. That's a whole other that's a whole other thing. But yeah, so many people like got addicted from actual legal painkiller use, and then obviously go on to try and get that then through illicit means, and then they'll probably more likely get a stronger version because they'll get fentanyl as a. What was the one that they were prescribing a lot in America? It wasn't fentanyl. It wasn't morphine. It was Oxycontin. There we go. Yeah. And then because like Oxycontin's like a stronger version of heroin, and then basically fentanyl's even stronger than that, basically.
Yeah, like I don't know if it was Sylvester or maybe not Sylvester, but drug dealers told us off the record. Not him, but other people have said to us that off camera that it was quite common around about sort of like 2008, because what happened, the very potted history of the sort of opioid crisis in America is that you had big pharma companies like Purdue and others incentivizing doctors to overprescribe opiates. So things like oxys and other things. And they're highly addictive. So people were getting, for quite low level knee injuries and stuff, were getting prescribed basically like kind of forms of morphine or Oxycontin or heroin or, diamorphine or whatever it might be. Then in 2008, there was a massive amount of litigation around it. And that pretty much stopped. Like it was legislation kind of stopped those practices. all the doctors completely like bottled it and stopped turned the tap off for those kind of prescriptions, and then you were left with a lot of people that had quite high levels of dependency to opiates that now didn't have. Previously, the government had been their drug dealer.
Yeah.
And drug dealers have told us in Vancouver and other places that around about that time, it was quite common for like white collar kind of workers from the other side of the tracks to be shiftily kind of approaching at 7 o'clock on a Friday night and saying like, dude, I don't know what I need, but I think I need heroin.
Yeah. Because they'd had their legal supply cut off, and now they need, and the cutting off the supply didn't cut off the addiction.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Oh, horrendous. So what's next, if you're allowed to say? And you might be a big secretive filmmaker that doesn't want to know what's coming up, but what's next for you? Because I know you've been off filming recently.
Yeah, there's a few things. So we've been filming throughout COVID with the biggest NHS trust in London, which is amazing. We had exclusive access to them, and we've kind of filmed that journey right through from the start of COVID till now. And obviously it's for UK viewers, they'll know that the NHS is really in the spotlight at the moment in the UK. And so that film really looks at how you deal with a public health emergency, how you can, because you can't really say to everybody, can you stop getting ill, please, for 2 years? Because we're quite busy with COVID. You know what I mean? You're still.
I mean, I feel like that's what we were told.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah.
I was told that with my sciatica. I went into hospital during it, and I was like, it's not COVID. I'm like, I know it's not COVID. It's a really painful nerve in my lower back, and it's got me in agony. And they're like, yeah, sorry, bye. Yeah, I mean, I work for the NHS, so I really shouldn't badmouth them ever, because especially considering I work for them and then I put things out publicly like this. It's like I'm dancing with the devil.
The card will be marked. Rishi Sunak will be round with a little clipboard.
I'll make him queue.
But yeah, so it's looking sort of like operationally at how do you spread resources when you've got such a pull on resources into one area. And that's kind of what that film's about. It's been a really interesting film to make, and we've been shooting it over more than 3 years now. And then we've also got a film which is around the subject of mental health, which looks at a firefighter with a history of PTSD. So 20 years of PTSD, 2 suicide attempts, and has never spoken about it. The classic male kind of crap at talking, has never really understood how to have those conversations and I recognize that in myself. And I think there's a generational thing where, this idea of kind of stoical and stiff upper lip, and you don't really address mental health at the points when you need to.
Yep.
And so he goes on this journey of discovery where he runs 250 kilometers through the Sahara Desert to try and better understand his own mental health. And as you can imagine, it's kind of like pretty epic, visually gorgeous film. And we've been working on that as well. And then we've got some new projects in the pipeline, but there's not quite at the point where we can confirm, but there's a couple of other things bubbling away that we should be able to talk about soon as well. So yeah, watch this space.
Amazing. Well, I'll look forward to actually seeing both of those, and then I'll probably just appear in your inbox. I'll be like, I've got questions, so many questions, but yeah, awesome. I think that's, wow, have I actually wrapped it up in roughly the right time? So I think that's everything I wanted to ask. There was one question from the chat earlier on, which I nearly threw in line because it was appropriate, because after you mentioned about the 3 people from the documentary having sadly passed away. Do you stay in touch with any of the people you meet or work with in your documentaries?
Yeah, try to. Some documentary makers sort of deliberately don't, because I don't know why actually, because it's not how I do it, but I think they feel that it's a blurring of kind of lines, and there could be like codependencies and things like that. For me, I just feel too vested in the lives of the people that we feature. It's a real privilege and a real responsibility. Anybody that trusts their story with you, and we like to know how they're getting on. In the case of $10 Death Trip, it's not easy all the time, because lots of the contributors from that don't have like mobile phones or fixed addresses or anything like that.
Yeah.
And they can be quite transient in life. Like, for example, there's a whole scene of that's shot in that tent city, you know, that scene where everyone was living in the tents. Yeah. So a few weeks after we filmed, the council came in and bulldozed that site, and all of the people living there scattered and went in all different directions. Now we've lost contact with nearly all of them, and we tried to sort of like find people, but and in one or two cases we have, but it's really quite hard. So it's harder for that film than probably any others. But we're in touch with quite a few people from that film, and everybody always asks about Ronnie. And the last we heard, not directly from him, but from somebody else that knows him, he was doing well.
Oh, good.
Yeah, the answer is yeah, we always do, and or at least we always try where we can.
Yeah, amazing. Again, you don't have to have an answer for this question, but I always like to ask it in case my questions have not led you towards something that you'd like to mention. Is there anything that you want to mention about, whether it's filmmaking in general, about $10 Death Trip, that you just want to say that my questions haven't led you towards?
Not really. I guess if people haven't watched it and want to, they can. If they live in Europe, they can check it out on Netflix. If they live outside Europe, they can probably find it on.
They can use VPNs. I said that, not
you. Yeah, they can nick a pirated copy of it from.
Watch it on UK Netflix. Say that you're in. I'm in Alabama, UK. I'm in Birmingham, UK, Alabama. No.
Yeah.
Is there anything you'd like to kind of promote or plug? Any social media, or anything like that, or any other projects before?
People can. We're historically completely rubbish at doing social media, but
you used to work in PR.
I know, and that's kind of why, because it's just too much like a busman's holiday. So but it is our New Year's resolution for this year to start putting content and updates out through our social channels. And I think I'm right in saying it's Hied Seek Films.
Yeah.
And people can find us there across Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook.
Yeah, I think I've got you. Actually, I was about to say I've got you on all those things, apart from the fact that a few days ago my Facebook got hacked and now I don't exist on Facebook anymore. But I can relate to the idea process that you talked about earlier on as well, because I have a ton of ideas all the time, and I tell my bloody community about them now, and then they're like, why does that not come up? Like, and I'm like, because like I act on like you said, sometimes you're just in the right place. Like, you know, you were over in Canada already for that, and it was like, right, this really has to be done. And then it comes down to the fact that the thing I hate the most, literally, about doing anything creative is promoting the damn thing. The podcast, I hate doing it. The stream, I hate doing it. Hate it. Just can't stand it. I mean, like, I'm not pushy enough. I'm not consistent enough with it. I'm like, I'm doing good stuff. Just come and watch, please. Thanks. You know, it's like, but I can't stand that part of it. It's like, yeah.
Yeah, it is the worst bit.
Yeah. Well,
although it's been a massive pleasure coming here.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting to you. Thank you very much for your time, and it's been. I mean, I really enjoyed the documentary both times. I weirdly cried more yesterday. I didn't cry on the first time, but yesterday I was crying. I think the first time I watched it on my own, and last night I said to my wife, I was like, you know, do you want to watch this? Because I'm rewatching it before I do the interview tomorrow, and she was like, yeah, okay, she's I was about to say she's never touched a drug in her life. Now, apart from weed, she has touched, and only in places where it's legal. Let's put it that. Like that's her standpoint on drugs, and she's never really had much of an understanding of people who do. She's even when we first started seeing each other, the fact that I had a past that involved drug use, like could not get a head around any of it, and I think she got very much a lot of the same from the film that I got. She got the human aspect of the people. She kind of like really fell for a lot of the characters that are in there, and what she took. And so she was getting emotional and she was crying. So I was like, I don't need to at the end of the couch. So it was, but it's been an absolute pleasure to. I
love hearing that, because I think a lot of people get the narrative about people that have never used any drugs themselves, which is obviously a lot of people. A lot of people also have. They get their a lot of their narrative about people that use drugs is from quite a narrow sort of section of the media. And I love hearing that people that watch the film maybe with a preconceived idea of what that community might look like were surprised, or it changed their mind, or they felt they connected with them on a human level.
Yeah.
Because that's really what we wanted to do, is to show the value of life in that community as much as any other.
I think that's what you did. So thank you very much for making it. Thank you for the and again tackling a couple of other really interesting to me topics anyway, coming up with both the health service and with mental health. I'm not quite sure. Actually, my boss in the NHS would probably love it, because he's an ultra runner / mental health advocate. So he'd probably love this. Or he'd probably watch it and he's one of those people, not for anyone else. He doesn't tell anyone else that they should do more, but to himself, he's always like, I'd run an extra 100 miles. And it's like, yeah, okay. So I think he'll really love that. But thank you very much again for for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting to you, and all the best with A, the future projects, and B, looking after that making social media a priority thing, because good luck. May the odds be ever in your favour.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
And, this is the abrupt end that you told me about.
This is the super abrupt end, yeah.
Yeah,
it's good, isn't it?
Getting ready to just be cut off and thrown into a black hole.